How about that? Okay. Now, everyone. Welcome. I have 10. Everybody has 10. I need to be. I have to use my. So you have to, Jerry, you'll have to be like this to the mic. Okay, everyone, thank you for attending this morning. We usually are in the Alumni Center. Those who can see out the window, you see a large smokestack. If you're new, that is where we generally meet, in the ballroom. So for our July meeting, that is where we'll be. My name is Laura Amsbury-O'Shea. I am on the board of Learning Before Lunch. There are, how many there are of us? There's 10, 12 board members. If y'all want to raise your hand so people can see who you are. Thank you for your service. We are a volunteer-driven organization. Nobody gets paid for this. We don't pay our speakers. I know we're cheap. No, I shouldn't say it at all. We're thrifty and efficient, and we appreciate every speaker who comes to talk to us. Today we have Jerry Strahan, but first, before I introduce him, I just want to give you a heads up on the next couple of speakers. In July, we'll have the photographer, Gus Bennett. And again, we will be back in the Alumni Association ballroom next month. And he is a photographer, and he does fine art, portrait, and entertainment photography. And then in August, we will have Bobby Freeland, and he will be speaking about the America 250 project, the Louisiana portion of it.
Bobby, too. Bobby.
So, and we have a long line of speakers that we finalize as we go along. We have a website, we have a Facebook page. So those are places that you can go and find out what who we're presenting at what day. Also, make it easy for everyone. Our meetings are the second Thursday of every month, 12 months of the year. Our membership is $25 for an individual, $30 for couples, $5 per session, and our UNO faculty, staff, and students are welcome to attend for free. So we appreciate the support of the University of New Orleans to give us spaces to have our meetings, and we also want to always give a shout out to the Alumni Association for providing the coffee in Danish that we get to have every meeting as well. And if I'm mistaken, and it's the foundation that provides the copies in Danish, I'm going to ask. I see Eric back there. Is it you all, or is it the Alumni Association?
So Legacy Society.
Legacy Society. There we go. I want to do a proper attribution because we really appreciate the support that we get to bring these presentations to you. So I think we have gone through all the housekeeping for today. So yes, Jerry has very graciously brought a copy of his book that he published in 1998 that he was talking about his experiences at Lucky Dog. So he is letting everybody have a copy of it for free. So please pick up a copy on your way out if you haven't, or if you want to pick up a copy during his presentation, just don't screw us. I left the marker there, so if Jerry, if you'd like to get a signed copy, if Jerry's willing to do that, there's a marker there on the table as well. So, and he also says that he is happy to stay past our allocated 11 a.m. ending time. So if you have questions and stories and things that you want to share, you're welcome to stay and do that. We don't have a meeting afterward in this room, so you're welcome to stay later if you so desire. So anyway, let me welcome Jerry. He is a UNO alumni. He graduated in 1976, and one of his big award-winning books was on the Higgins Landing craft. But he has worked at the, thank you for looking at it. Everybody please put your phones on silent. And those at home, please mute yourself. And we should be in good shape. So he has a great book on Higgins biography and the landing crafts of World War II. If you have not read it, please do check it out. It's great. He worked as a student under Stephen Ambrose, so he's got some great credentials for the work that he's done. He's also worked, just recently retired from Lucky Dog after 46 years. Yes. So, tell us some stories about that experience and the people he worked with and that whole organization. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce you, Jerry Strahan.
Can you hear me up there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm going to start off with just maybe about 10 minutes. And I'm going to really keep myself in just 10 minutes of where I started and how I ended up at Lucky Dogs, and a little about Lucky Dogs itself. And then we'll go into some stories of vendors. Unfortunately, we've got 46 minutes for 46 years. Lucky Dogs is kind of like TV sitcom Taxi. We're located in New Orleans with hot dog carts instead of New York with cabs. And our character, if you think, how many people here have read not many nations, but Confederacy of Dunces? Okay, great. Ignatius really was a mixture of many characters. So let me get started, and then we'll go into some stories on people, and then I'll answer questions. In 1968, I was a young, naive high school junior who spent weekends running hot dogs at Doug Talbot's Orange Julius kiosk in the middle of Lakeside Mall. Life was simple, calm, and wholesome. Then Doug transferred me to his newly opened Orange Julius on Bourbon Street. No longer were my customers housewives pushing baby carriages or grandmothers with curlers in their hair. I was now serving strippers, ladies of the evening, Vietnam veterans, tourists, free love advocates, and religious groups hoping to save the souls of the downtrodden. Orange Julius was on the menu, cold beer was on tap, and Rolling Stone music blasted from our speakers. It was a 17-year-old's dream job. My parents never saw that. However, by the early 1970s, the hippie movement and drug culture mushroomed in New Orleans as elsewhere. So our children were moving into the quarter in increasing numbers, and they were drawn to Orange Julius because of its California look. They monopolized our seating and sprawled out on the floor. Most of the time, they bought and shared a single drink. Problems increased and profits decreased. At that point, Doug sold Orange Julius and purchased Lucky Dogs Knowledge, a street vending hot dog company founded in 1947. A street vending hot dog company founded in 1947 by two brothers. Next slide, Stephen and Rasmus County. In 1970, as Doug took over his new enterprise, I began my freshman year at UNO, LSU at the time. From then until I received my master's degree in 1976, I occasionally worked catering events for Doug, and during New Year's and Mardi Gras, often helped out at Doug's commissary. During my years in college, three events greatly affected Lucky Dogs. First, Doug moved the company's operation from the 1300 block of St. Charles Avenue to to the 200 block of Decatur Street in the French Quarter. The next event was tragic. On January 2nd, 1973, Lucky Dog's night manager, Bob Alexander, was found shot in the back and dead on Lucky Dog's office floor. The company's alarm safe was open and the cash box had been left empty on Bob's desk. And finally, in a case brought before the U.S. Supreme Court, that's a picture of me and serving hot dogs from catering. Here we go. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of the city of New Orleans, thus giving the city council total control over who could street men in the French Quarter. It was in the summer of '76, shortly after I received my MA in history, that Doug called and asked for favors. He wanted me to deposit the company's daily receipts while he and his family were vacationing in Florida. He wasn't certain that he could trust the task to the present manager, Dick Wilder. The first day, as I walked through the shop's open front doors, the building appeared deserted. No one was in the main part of the warehouse, nor in the office. I walked to the back of the building and into the kitchen. There, sitting in the middle of the room on a wooden bar stool, was an attractive, petite blonde in her mid-20s, shoulder-length hair, faded jeans, obviously on some kind of drugs, and with a hangman's noose around her neck. The thick, large rope ran down her back and lay coiled harmlessly on the floor. I wasn't sure what I'd walked into. A suicide, a murder, a practical joke. I quickly surveyed my surroundings. There was no sign of danger, so I tried to loosen the noose. The rope wouldn't budge. I picked up one of the knives that vendors use to dice onions and carefully cut through the noose. Once it was eliminated, I inquired as to the whereabouts of the day manager. He's on his way to California, she replied as she attempted to stay upright on the stool. Does the night manager know this? I think so, she said, giggling. They left in his trunk. I immediately opened the safe. It was empty. At that very moment, the payphone hanging on the wall next to the office door began ringing. It was Doug calling from Florida. He cheerfully asked how everything was going. I had just cut a noose off the girl's neck. Previous night, money was missing. Lucky Dogs no longer had a day manager or a night manager, and he wanted to know how everything was going. I wasn't sure where to begin. I responded, I have some good news and some bad news. Give me the bad news first, he replied. The day manager has quit and gone to Florida. Christ, what's the good news? He got a free ride with the night manager, and the hangman around her neck is still alive. There was silence. Suddenly, I became both the day manager and night manager. For 6 weeks, I held both positions without a day off. Then, by the grace of God, we were able to hire my replacements. As they took over the reins, I entered Tulane University on a doctoral fellowship in history. By the end of November, for a variety of reasons, I had become disillusioned. I was going through the motions, but I was no longer focused. So I withdrew from school. Later, in December, I called Doug to wish him a Merry Christmas. As soon as he discovered that I was no longer at Tulane, he immediately started recruiting me to become Lucky Dog's first ever general manager. He wanted me to train his new staff. We both agreed that the position would be temporary. Unfortunately, that staff didn't work out, nor did the long list of others that followed. Never closing doors, friendly bargaining, and a lack of self-control that didn't matter. My wife Jane, who at the time was a high school math teacher, was pregnant with our first child. One morning, as Doug and I sat at his kitchen table discussing the business, he offered, if you will remain as Lucky Dog's general manager, I will compensate you more than enough where Jane won't have to go back to work. She can stay home with the baby. Doug was desperate. He didn't want to deal with the daily aggravations, the ever-changing managers, and the often drunken, undependable things. I thought about it and shocked myself by accepting. Even then, neither he nor Pop considered it as a long-term arrangement. My plan was to eventually teach history in high school. Thus began my 46 years as Lucky Dog's general manager. During that period, Doug and I fished together, hunted together, and would have business meetings weekly at his kitchen table. He handled all of the financial aspects of the company, and I handled all of the operational aspects. Surprisingly, from 1977 until he passed away in 2014, he came to Lucky Dogs less than 25 times. A vendor once remarked, "It's like working for Charlie's Angels." Lucky Dog's crew over the years has been comprised of carnivores, gays, transvestites, lesbians, straight men and women, blacks, whites, rednecks, and veterans who returned home from war but couldn't quite find inner peace. There were also slow learners and the incredibly well educated. We've had a vendor who could recite Shakespearean soliloquies from memory, a Tulane professor who taught business classes during the day and worked a cart for us at night, and several vendors who personally knew the wardens at the top U.S. prisons. Then there were those who could fit into corporate America, full of contempt for less structured, less materialistic, and oftentimes nomadic lifestyle. Strange as it might sound, they all bonded together. Some vendors worked 1 month, others lasted weeks, and there were those that stayed for years. In the end, the street would wear them down. Drunken customers, street thugs, long hours, working in the cold, the heat, and the rain, all made life hard. Frustrations would mount, and vendors would suddenly disappear without a word. But I knew they would return. The swallows returned to Capistrano, and the vendors always returned to life. Time would erase the negative, the excitement of the street, the freedom that the job offered, and the bonds that they had formed with others who worked on urban eventually drew them back. In some cases, it took months, and in other cases, years. But sooner or later, they all realized that life anywhere else seemed dull. Let's go. This is the book that I gave you, and I'll tell you an interesting thing, 2 interesting things about it. First off, when it came out in 1998, about a year later, I received a phone call at the office, and it was an Army colonel who wanted to interview me because he was doing a story for the Army newspaper. And I said, "Well, why would you be doing I'm managing Ignatius?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing it on your book because it's on the suggested reading list for Army officers." Why is that? And he said, "Well, the people you deal with are the same kind of people we deal with. Please, when you write the story, tell them do not use the management techniques I use, or you're gonna be thrown out of the Army." The second thing is everything in this book is true, unfortunately. I also took 100 pages out before I published it because we were still an operating business. I left those stories out. The other thing is that all of these stories, when I wrote this, I put a camera down to Lucky Dogs, and I would invite vendors up, and those who wanted to, I would take them. And then when I wrote the chapters, I told them what I was doing. When I wrote the chapters, they would come and go in town, out of town, go back north and work on a golf course in the summer, and then they got cooler, they'd come back down here. I would let them read the chapter, of which everything I wrote about them, and let them approve or disapprove and edit it. Now, almost to a man or woman, they all wanted to embellish the story. We're going to keep it factual. Most of the names are true. There's one individual, PJ, and I will tell you his real name. PJ wanted me to use his real name, but PJ lived in alleyways, and he could drink more than any human being I've ever seen. He could drink 5th of bourbon, and you wouldn't know he was drunk. I mean, he was that kind of guy. But he had a daughter who was going to school here at UNL. And I said, "There's no way I'm going to use your name. I will use your initial, PJ." I said, "She has the right to say you're her father, or just let it go by, nobody will ever know." I said, "You don't have the right to put her in that position. So we just use his initial." Let's go to that. Bob Lucky, L-U-C-K-E. Lucky was one of the vendors who was there when I started. And he gave me perhaps the best insight on employees and Lucky Dogs that anyone ever did. We were standing in front of the shop one day, and I said, "Bob, you have to be on time. You have to be neat and clean. You can't drink. You can't overcharge." And I wanted 2 other things. And he said, "Jeff, if I was all of those things, I'd be in a 3-piece suit in the business on Pointer Street." And I said, "You know, you're right. We shoot a 3 out of 5. Kenneth Smith, Smitty, Smitty's about 5'4". He worked for us for 15 years. A lot of problems in his past. He had gone from foster home, and then later was adopted. Smitty would sometimes come in dressed as Roy Rogers, and other days come in dressed as Dale. One day they called me and they said, "Jerry, we're sending Smitty up. You need to see him. We're not going to make this call." So my office was on the second floor. The Lucky Dogs was in the Decatur Street office on the first floor. When we moved to the ground office. They sent Smitty up. He walks through the door. He's got on a Prince Valiant move. He was clean shaven, but he had on a Prince Valiant move. He had on a Liberace style shirt. He had on a black mini skirt and fishnet stockings and heels. And the first thing he said coming through the door is, "I know you're not going to let me work in this because I'm a male." I said, "That's not true. We do not discriminate. You know that as well as I do." But I said, "You also know we follow the Catholic school dress code. If you kneel down and the miniskirt touches the floor, you can wear it. If it doesn't, you gotta go home and change." He knelt down, he missed it by that. He left, he came back wearing blue jeans and old worn cowboy boots and a collared shirt. The other thing about Smitty, over the years, he almost set an all-time record of Lucky Dog. First, he hit 2 privately owned park cars, which we had a big park. He had them with a Lucky Dog park. He was just short, he couldn't see all the time. And some of the streets really, in defense of the vendors, there's such a crowd on them, the cars weigh close to 700 pounds, 650, 700 pounds. So if they get on that crowd and go down, there's no control. Well, the 2 cars were enough of a problem. But one night coming in on the neutral ground on Canal Street, he ran into a police car. One time going into his parking spot that we parked on Bourbon Street, he backed up and knocked over a police motorcycle. He almost completed the LPD trifecta by hitting a police horse. But the horse was fast enough to get out. Smitty had a lot of money that he would save, and he would leave it in my safe. Most of these guys don't trust banks. They don't have bank accounts. But they would leave money in the safe. After a period of time, they got to know me well, but never cheaper. They'd put an envelope with money in it, I'd keep it in the safe. When they needed it, I'd give it back to them. Smitty probably had $1,500 in the safe. He could easily have gotten an apartment. But he wanted to sleep for a while in our elevator shaft. It was an old handful elevator, rope floor, and we never used it. And the bottom was maybe 8 by 10, something like that, had a concrete floor. And I knew the reason. The reason was Smitty was lonely. And if he stayed at the shop, he had a day manager and a cleanup man to depend on and talk to. And at night, he had the night manager and all the vendors when they came in when he came on. So I let him do it for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I said, "Look, really, you got to find it for him. You got to move." The next one. Father Larry Simmons, came to me. He's a scam artist. He came to me from Miami, Florida. He told me that in Miami, he would collect money on the street to help the needy, and of course, he was the needy. He told me the story when he came in. I didn't believe him. So one day he shows up at the shop wearing his costume. And I catch him right where he's about to push out the door. Well, his car keeps on going out the door, and it's on Gravity Street. Office is on. I said, "Larry, can you work Jackson Square?" I said, "You cannot go out from St. Louis and dress in the precinct for that money." So I left it. So we're standing there doing this, and this nice lady walks up, and she says, "Father, you're pushing a Lucky Dog." And he said, "Yes, my child, the Lord asked me and called me to come to help the sinners." And she said, "Oh, Father, that's such a worthy cause." And I'm standing behind her. She's opening her purse, and I'm going, "No, Larry." You know, she takes out a $20 bill, and she hands it to me. He said, "Thank you, my child." And he walks down the street. I said, "Larry, why did you take the money?" He said, "You saw it. It made her feel so good." I didn't feel bad either. I said, "No, Larry, first off, you're going inside and changing. And then when you get to Jackson Square, take the $20, walk into the St. Louis Cathedral, and donate it." The next one. All right. 2 stories for Steve. I'm in the shop one day during the morning, down in the kitchen. We're on Decatur Street. And I hear clomp, 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 clomp. Couldn't figure out what it was. I walked out of the kitchen into the warehouse where the parts were. And there's a man standing there with a horse. I said, excuse me, but you can't put that horse in here. He said, I will sell you this priceless steed for $10, saddle and all. And I looked, and the saddlebag, a saddle blanket says, NOPD. I said, sir, you've got to get this horse out of here. Board of Health doesn't allow you and the horse out. So I managed to get them both on Decatur Street. Nice sized crowd moving up and down Decatur Street, Crown Street to Jackson Square. And he gets the horse outside. I said, you need to take this animal and tie it back up where you found it. So he doesn't do that. I'm about to try. He ends up mounting the horse and sitting in the saddle. Now, of the two, the horse was the most intelligent. And the horse starts kind of walking slowly toward Jackson Square. And he's swaying left to right in the saddle. And he starts singing Roy Rogers' Happy Trail. And I thought, I don't think so. I don't know whatever happened to him. I can only imagine. Three little kids. One night during Halloween, right at the Bourbon and Conte, right outside the Ralston's Hotel, Troy Smith was in the building. And he said, Chair, I have a real problem. I said, what was that? He said, a massive crowd gathered around my car. He said, the police had the three little pigs spread eagle up against the Ralston Hotel, and Big Bird was spread eagle on the policeman's hood. And he said, the big bad wolf was standing right in the crowd watching. Apparently, a brawl had broken out between these guys. And the three little pigs had grabbed Big Bird's head off of him and thrown it in the crowd. It was going down the street like a beach ball. They were all fighting over the game. Well, someone called the police and the fight went on. The police come, break it up, get them aside, and these two officers' choices that are standing next to this car, and one's telling the other one, we can't take them in. There's no way we can take these in. He said, you realize us powering the three little pigs and Big Bird for the rest of our career. And the fact that the big bad wolf got away. So they go. The police said, look, Big Bird, you go after your head that way. Three little pigs, you go toward Canal Street. If I see any of you in the quarter for the rest of the night, you're going to jail. Tommy Truman, a super nice guy. Worked for us off and on. He would work maybe 4 or 5 months, and then he would go join the carnivals and be gone for a while, and he would come back in the winter when the carnival was over. Great worker when he was sober. He was good for about 3 weeks, and then he was gone for about 2. Well, one day he came in the shop totally blitzed, which Tommy usually didn't do, and he only so blitzed he couldn't get out of his apartment. But he came in the shop blitzed, and he walks up to me and he says, I can't work today. Well, it's pretty obvious because I couldn't sit anywhere anyway. But he knew if he had a logical excuse, a really good excuse, it would be an excuse to absence. No, it wouldn't be a problem. And he knew medical was always good. If you had a medical problem, you could take off. I said, well, Tommy, what's your problem? He said, I have to go to the doctor. I said, well, Tommy, what's wrong? He looks at me with a straight, totally straight face and says, I think I'm pregnant. I said, I do believe you should go to the doctor. But there's one thing you have to promise me, it's excused. If the rabbit dies, I want to be married. We wandered out, and I saw him about a week later. Norris. Great smile, likable guy. Couldn't stay on his high point. Chasing women up and down the street. Sometimes couldn't stay sober. Was never really good for me. But I needed a cleanup man, so I brought Norris into the shop. And he was really good. Except one Mardi Gras. 11 o'clock, Norris disappeared. It's one of the busiest days of the year, and he's nowhere to be found. 1 o'clock, Norris strolls back in like nothing happened. Norris, where have you been? Well, I was up at Lee Circle. The family was having a big reunion. He said, Aunt Bessie had fried chicken. He said, boy, she can really fry good chicken. And he said there were pies, free beer. He said it was great to be with the family. I said, well, you enjoyed yourself? He said, well, yeah. He said, I had a great time until one of the people there, one of the guys said, I don't remember ever having a cousin Norris. He said, two other ones said, I don't remember a cousin Norris either. He said, I had enough time to grab one more beer and that down after about 2 blocks. Norris, in the end, after many years, I had to be tough love with Norris. And I had to bring him down to the very rock bottom when they were trying to save him. So I fired him. He didn't show up for several days. Then came in once, I fired him. And he called me one day, and I knew it was going to happen. He said, sure, I'm not working. I can't do my rent. They put everything out on the sidewalk. I said, no, you can pick everything up and you will. So I put my truck and I drove down to Lane Avenue, picked all his belongings up off the sidewalk. Norris wasn't there. He was somewhere having a beer in the morning. I wait there about an hour and a half. He shows up. I bring him back to the shop. I store all of his belongings on the second floor. We had a big warehouse, it was pretty open. And I said, Norris, you need to go to defense, or you need to get out. You are spiraling at such a rate that you might miss it. And he said, I have nowhere to go. I said, give me this. He said, I have a sister who lives in Mississippi, but I haven't talked to her. She lives on her whole family farm. I said, give me your money. I called the sister. I explained the problem. And then I put Norris on the phone, and they suddenly called me. And then I bought him a bus ticket and sent him to Mississippi. And he would call me every couple of weeks and tell me he was watching squirrels in the backyard and he had been plowing with the tractor. And he eventually stayed in Mississippi. He came trying to come to New Orleans to work for a couple of months, but I wouldn't hire him back. I said, you need to go back to Mississippi. So he's still in Mississippi now. He got his driver's license back, bought a motorcycle, and working at a mechanic shop. The camera. I decided that since I'm not there at night, I was only on there during the daytime. I had a day manager, I had a night manager. But I wanted to see what took place at night. So I installed a camera system. I put a sign up, all vendors. Camera system will be activated tonight. It has video and audio. Well, that night, the vendors pushed in. It's about 3:30 in the morning. And one of them says, he didn't turn it on. There's no red light. And so he takes out a cigarette. You're not supposed to smoke in the shop. Lights up a cigarette and blows smoke rings toward the camera. Another one goes over to Joe's Jungle Bar across the street and buys a can of beer. Comes back and I'm supposed to drink in the shop. Holds the can up, pops the top, and takes a few swigs. Some girl, I don't know where she came from, came and flashed her boobs to the camera. And then 3 or 4 other ones all did their own little spiel. Well, the next morning I come in, I thought the PC on tape. But I had a big TV in there. Put it on the TV. Lo and behold, everything's there. Well, at the time, we had also done the concessions for Tulane University, and I had a big 4-wheel. My office is about 24 by maybe 18. It's a really nice office on the second floor. And I roll the popcorn cart in, pop the whole big batch of popcorn. Waited till all the vendors came in. And I told the big person, you can set them up, but they can't leave the building. So when they all got there, I called them upstairs. I had chairs sitting on up in my office. They walked in, and I said, why don't you get some popcorn? I said, something y'all are gonna enjoy this. And the movie, I said, oh yes, it's uncut. So they sat down, I turned the light on, hit the screen, hit the VCR, it was dead silent. I said, my cameras do not have a I never had a problem with them with that. The right shoe. Like I told the military, you can't use the management techniques I had to use. You have to realize this is such a high-tech group. A lot of these guys, their main problem, the reason they couldn't stand on the jobs, is they couldn't follow rules. They didn't listen to authority. When I wrote rules up and posted rules, they were good for 24 hours at the most, usually good for 20 minutes. So I had one vendor who kept coming up short. At the end of the night, he would check in, and he always wouldn't have $30, it was $50.
never had the right amount of money. He always paid it back, but he was using me for a loan company. He was using the company as a loan. And I kept telling him, you can't do this. So one cold January, he pushes in, and I happen to be there during the night shift that night. And he comes up about 79 shoes. I said, take your shoes off. You may have the money in your shoe. No money in my shoes. Take your socks off. No money in my socks. So he puts his left sock on his left shoe on, and I reach down, I pick up his right sock, his right shoe, and I put them under the counter. He said, what are you doing? I said, you're holding my money, I'm holding your shoe and sock. I said, because when you walk home tonight, every time that right foot hits that cold January pavement outside, you're gonna think, I shouldn't have come up short. The next morning he came in with $70, paid me, and he got his sock and shoe back. Never came up short again. Batman. This is back in the late 70s. On the corner of Julie and Camp, back then, it was a corner where there were a lot of rooming houses. You paid $1 for a bed. It was just like a giant warehouse with cots everywhere. And you know, if you paid $1, you got $8. So if you want to spend 60 hours a day, you paid $2. And you always, the guys knew that when they slept there, take your shoes off and put them between the mattress and the springs by the head. Because if you didn't, the next morning, your shoes are going to be on somebody else's feet. And in the wintertime, if you had a coat, you take it off and use it as a coat. Because otherwise your coat's on someone else when you wake up. But I hired a guy, and he promised me that he would show up. He would be there. It was a week. And I said, I'm depending on you. It's a cleanup. Are you going to be? I swear to you, Jerry, if you give me the job, I will do it. And he lived with Julie on the second floor. There's a building, it's still there, it has a balcony. And he's supposed to be there at 8. 9 o'clock, he's not there. And my day man. So I'm missing 2 people. So I start cleaning the car. I'm trying to get everything ready in the kitchen. I said, this ain't gonna work. So I lock the door, I get my truck. I drive to Julian's home, where his apartment is. I can't get inside to knock on his door because there's a master door downstairs and I don't have a key to it. And back then, things were not politically correct. And there was a group of winos in the street, they call them winos. And they're all passing the bottle and drinking. I pull my truck up on the sidewalk and I try to throw rocks at Tom's window. Well, that doesn't wake him up. So I jump in the back of my truck and stand on the cab. And now this whole group of guys who were sharing the Thunderbird bottle, they're all cheering. Hey, traffic is slowing down on Camp. Go, what's happening? I jump on the top of my truck onto the balcony. Tom's window was open. I went in through the window, woke him up, and said, if I'm going to work today, you're going to work today. So meet me downstairs. You got 5 minutes. I'm going to wait. Well, if I come out, I go down the stairs and come out the door. All these guys are cheering. They all thought I was a narcotics agent, or maybe immigration. They weren't sure what I was, but they were all cheering for me. Good job, well done. Patting me on the back, and one guy walks up and says, "You're not going to believe this. I just saw Batman leap from the truck." Wait for a little while. You're going to see Superman come out. Tom showed up to work the rest of the day, and yeah, he worked for 4 or 5 months. All these guys were trained. So I ended up knowing that I had to travel 3 or 4 nights, 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 cleanup times. So if one guy was on a truck, I was putting him off the street, put him back on. And that's what really Doug did not want to do. Just didn't have the personality. He wanted to fire everybody. I said, you fire everybody, but other business. The next Big Time. Big Time is about 6'8". Looks like an offensive lineman for the Saints. He was a nice individual to me in a way. He had been in prison when he was a young kid. He had been shot in the head, and his mother told him that she thought they removed the brain instead of the bullet. It was an active killing shooting. Later, he was for a long time was a doorman and bouncer at a bar in Atlanta. And he said in his youth at one point in time, he had actually been with a motorcycle gang as an enforcement. But he had, from being in prison, he had Aryan Nation tattoos and all that. He walked into my office with Amy Sincerity.
Had I not come to Lucky Dog, I would have died of racism. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, here you hire everybody, and we work with everybody. And he got to know black people, and he got to know black people. And he realized he had a lot more common with some of these guys than he did some of the white guys he knew back home. And some of his best friends said, well, he and his buddy, Steve, who was 6'10", that looked like he could play defensive end. I used Steve to help and try to help my son move from one house to another. Steve is the only human being on earth I've ever seen pick up a love seat under one arm. He was a monster. But they were both really, by training, heavy equipment operators. And they told me, they said, look, we're going to go to South Dakota. We can make a lot of money with the old shale up there running heavy equipment. So they went up there. Well, they couldn't get a heavy equipment job. The job they got was menial. The cost of living up there, it was like the old company store. You might have made a good salary, but eggs were $18, and there's $500 a night for this. So they called me one day and they said, look, we're broke, but we'd like to come back to New Orleans. We don't have any money for the cost. And I got to be honest with you, we're not going to work for you when we get back. We're going to maybe work weekends for you, but we're going to try to work with both brothers. I said, not a problem. I said, go to the bus station. There'll be tickets waiting for you. The password will be lucky. So I pulled out a personal credit card. I called. I bought them both bus tickets to come back to New Orleans. I knew they would pay me back over a period of time. About a week later, Tiny walks in the office. He said, you didn't have to do what you did because we told you we might not work for you. I said, well, Tiny, you all have done work here before. No, what a friend's for. And so he says, is there anything I can do for you? I said, no, everything's fine. And he starts to leave, and he turns around and says, you need anybody beat up? No, Tiny, I'm good. If I ever do, you're going to be the first one. 1982, I get a phone call. Reagan's in office. It's tear down that wall. We have the Cold War going on. The gentleman calls me and tells me he's with the State Department and that he had been in New Orleans to give a lecture on foreign policy, and that everyone in his office had been reading or had read the Confederacy of Dunces. And after giving his lecture that night, he went walking up River Street, and lo and behold, he saw the Lucky Dog carts, which really in a Confederacy of Dunces or the Paradise Vending carts. And he said he called the next morning and told them, I saw the carts. And they said, yeah, you were on River Street drinking a little too much last night. They didn't believe it. He said, you have a picture or something you can send me? Well, I truly believe that it was one of Doug's friends, because he had some that would often pull pranks. I thought it was one. I said, well, give me an address. So it gives me the address for the State Department in Washington. I don't send anything because I think it's a joke. Well, about a week and a half later, he called me back. He said, Jerry, my reputation, as meager as it is really taking a hit because nobody believes I even talked to you. I said, well, I got to be honest with you. I said, give me a phone number. Let me see if I can find something. So he gives me a phone number. And I wait about 10 minutes, and I call the number. I look in the phone book, it's a Washington, D.C. area code. Thought about it, it's going to be some Ace Hardware or something. I call the number, the lady picks up, and she says, Office of the Secretary. I said, excuse me, Secretary of what? She said, sir, I think you have the wrong number. I said, well, I'm trying to reach a Mr. Sykes. She said, who are you? I said, Jerry Strahan of Lucky Dog. She said, you do exist. She transferred me to him. And I said, I got to be honest with you. I didn't believe you were at the State Department, you existed. He said, well, nobody here believed you existed either. So I said, can you send me something? So I did. I sent him a t-shirt and a photograph of Lucky Dog. And I sent him a job offer. I said, if the State Department ends up being a dead-end street, feel free to give me a call because I guarantee you I will have a nice-looking card and a good printer for you. This is the letter they sent back. Well, in 1982, there was no internet. You couldn't Google who someone was. And I had totally forgot about About a year ago, I ran across the line, and I Googled it. He was the Assistant Secretary of State. He was over Canada and all of Europe. And he really, about the baloney he could sell in Washington, he didn't sell to He also became the only non-political appointment as ambassador to the United Kingdom. And I bet he would have made a hell of a lot. Jim Campbell and Joe Ming. Campbell worked for us often, 10, 15 years at least. He came to us in '79, met a young girl on the street by the name of Pepper, and he and Pepper married. And they worked hard together for about 5 years. They ended up divorcing, and he left and moved to California. He was in California about 9 years. He stopped drinking, started wearing a three-piece suit, worked for the Small Business Administration, and remarried. And he was married out there about 7 or 8 years. One Christmas Eve, I get home from church, my wife and I are two sons, and the phone rings, and it's Jim. I said, Jim, how are you doing? He said, great. He said, Jerry, I'm coming home. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I'm coming back to be a vendor, save me from. I said, Jim, you've gotten off the street, you've got a good job, you've got retirement, you've got everything you need. He said, I'm rotting behind the sticks. He said, I'm not living. He said, I'm just here. He ended up divorcing his wife. And a week after he called me, he showed back up Lucky. They divorced while he was a Lucky Punch. He ran across Pepper. They remarried. And they worked together for several more years until she died of cancer. Then Jim left and moved back to Anchorage, outside of Anchorage, Alaska, where we went to high school. And there, that Camilla, who he had known in high school, and they married. And for several more years, he would email me all the time and ask me how things were with Lucky Dog, and I would ask him if he had seen a moose. And then Camilla died of cancer also. And he had reconnected with one of his daughters from his first marriage, and he moved down to Florida to be with them. And Jim has now passed away. The gentleman in the background, Bill Mayfield, worked for us as a vendor. Was a pretty good vendor, but one night in the shop, the night manager, Ben Bowman, who was a huge guy, he rode a yellow Harley Davidson and a mountain of man, had been a bartender at Hell's Angels before, so you know this stuff. But it's so big, he was a gentleman because he knew he didn't have to prove anything. And no one made fun of him for riding the upper Harley. I mean, no one. So Bill worked on it, but the safe was left open one night. And he saw it open. And he went behind the counter while Big Ben was in the bathroom, and he took the money out of his safe and left. Well, he's gone for many years. And then I discovered really what happened. He calls me on the phone. He's now older, and he wants to come back. I said, well, look, you can come back, but you've got to make restitution. So I put him in the shop as a day man because he wouldn't have a little money, and I could garnish as well. And he worked for us for another 5 or 6 years. It was a good boy until he just couldn't work anymore for medical issues. But Paul Hager. Paul worked for me for 19 years off and on. And Paul was gay. I always call him by his given name, Paul. He liked the other people calling him Paul. Yeah, hey, roll with the flow, whatever you want. Paul worked Jackson Square as a vendor. When you had Chef Paul food home with Kate Paul's Kitchen on the chart, right up the street, Paul had this hot dog. I go out there one day and he's got a sign on it, Gay Paul's Kitchen. Now the other thing, Chef, I thought that Chef food home this, and he told me the story. He used to sneak out, his wife had him in a strip club. And he used to sneak out the back of the restaurant on his food. And he would go up to Jackson Square and buy a couple of lucky dogs you can call, and eat the hot dogs and then go back to the restaurant. So his wife, well, she found out. And she sent one of the police officers who ate there quite often, a friend of theirs, up to the square to tell Paul if he ever sold the chef another hot dog, he's going to jail. Now, Paul had worked for us as night managers in Mardi Gras, and with $4,000 or $5,000 was always lived in the kind of photograph of me, one of the few people I have ever met. He didn't drunk, but somebody would come in and say, I live at 1852 St. Charles Avenue in a rooming house. And Paul said, no, you don't. That's a lie. There's nothing built there. His memory was incredible. But he had so many other things. Gambling was one, and that's a problem for a lot of things. Video poker, which in the quarter used to call video poker. And they would lose all their money. They would make the money and they would lose. Well, Paul came up short one time with about $1,500. What did he do? He made the first run, picked up money on the street from all the vendors. We would normally make 4 money runs a night. So the first run he deposited in the safe. The second run, he got the urge to go play slot machines that night. And he lost that money. So then he makes the midnight run and decides, I'm going to take that money and go win one I want. Doesn't happen. Lost that. He finishes, makes a 2 o'clock run, drops it in the safe. Checks all the vendors in, drops it in the safe. Cleans up the whole shop, leaves his keys on the desk, and leaves. Several months later, I get the first payment from him. He said $500 in a money order to help repay what he had taken. With an apology saying, I had to get out of town. I couldn't handle my gambling. I will pay you the rest. He was filing for Social Security and doing more time to me. He said, over the years, I'll just pay you the rest. He ended up passing away before he ever paid anymore. I had another night manager steal over $1,000. And about a year and a half after that, I didn't press charges against him. I told him, at some point in time, you're going to pay me back. You pay the company back. And about a year and a half later, we walked in, handed me the money, and wanted to pay me the interest on the money also. I said, no, you're man enough to come in and correct what you did wrong. I'll take that. I don't need this. And we're clear. But, so there, a lot of these guys had work ethic. They weren't standing in a food line. They weren't begging at the end of the dinner. So I'll tell you this about the people who beg at the end of the dinners. The bar worked through one time, he used to panhandle for all friends. He said, any day, generally, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he could make $150 to $200 a day in cash. And the reason they have dogs isn't because they're necessarily animal lovers. They all know if they have a dog, before the police can arrest them, the SPCA has to come take the dog. And it might take the SPCA an hour or 2 because the police officer doesn't know an hour or 2. That's one of the dogs. There was another time I walked into the shop. Paul Hager and my cleanup man, who's also named Paul Mendel, had been friends for a long time, but they got to annoying. So I walked into the shop. Mendel had a Japanese Genzu knife up against Paul's throat in the kitchen. Well, one thing I learned, sometimes you have to elevate the situation even higher and rapidly bring it down. It's a shot. So I walked in and I started screaming at him, like, what in the hell are you doing? I said, you cut his throat, then we got to clean up the mess. Now we're short of night man. You're going to work tonight? You're behind on cleaning the car. You're going to have to deal with the police. You're going to go to jail. Now I got to find another cleanup man. Give me the damn knife. So he gave me the knife. I said, yeah, you should shake hands. They shook hands and we got another 6 months. All right. Fred Godelli, NBC Sports. Do y'all remember when Sean was injured on the sidelines?
Yes.
And he had to sit up on Sunday Night Football, I think it was against the Detroit Lions. He was sitting up in the press box. And they showed him with his foot up on the desk and he was eating a honey. Well, the announcers made some remark that Coach Payton thought was derogatory. He called the show. I'm on the phone with my son. Mark was one of the owner's sons at the time and was looking for school and answers the phone. It's Coach Payton. He said, can I speak to Jerry? He's on the other line. Can he call me back? So he takes the number. But I get the phone with Chris. I call it. Well, Coach Payton is now on the field with the team, and Greg Benson, the head of communications, comes to the phone. And I said, what can I do for you? He said, well, Coach Payton was upset with what occurred on Sunday Night Football. And his first idea, we talked him out of things. He wanted to know how much it would cost and how many hot dogs it would take to fill NBC's booth with hot dogs. So, he said, but as a backup, we want you to go because we had the hot dog carts out of the airport. We had passes, we can get down the condos. He said, we want you to go meet Fred Godelli in the Sunday night crew when they get off the plane with a box of hot dogs. So my wife decorated the box with Saints wrapping paper. I dressed Vincent up with an iPad and made a sign, and we went out back to plane. So the three of them get off the plane, and Godelli sees the sign, walks up, and Vincent hands him the box. Well, he takes the box and he does this. I said, no, you have to hold it straight. And so one of the other guys says, what's in it? And he lifts the cover, and he automatically knows that it's hot dogs. They're little plastic containers. He said, are they good? I said, yes, they're all fine. He said, let's take them to the hotel and eat them. And Godelli didn't realize at first what was happening. And then he realized that he kind of got upset with Peyton that he set hot dogs out here. Well, the next day, I suggested to Vincent, I said, why don't we take a lucky dog, bring it to the dome, and let me push it in the stadium by the NBC trailer, and we'll feed the whole crew. We'll put a big sign up there, courtesy of Coach Strahan. So we did that. We fed the whole NBC crew. And the NBC crew says, no coach has ever given us anything. Now they were all friends. Well, a gentleman comes out and says, Coach Payton would like to see you. So I walk back to the locker room, and he's sitting up there on a table, and they're dealing with his leg, wrapping his leg. So we talked for a few minutes, and he keeps talking, and keeps talking. I'm looking at my watch, thinking, it's not long before the game, and I've got to tell him, Coach, you know, look, I love talking to you, but isn't there something a little important than talking to me right now? He's not. So he was very nice of her. Vincent, back to Vincent. Vincent worked for us for years, and then he was a vet. He ended up losing one leg, gangrene. And even though he really couldn't do his job, I left him on the night shift. But no longer would he have to make money. We had all the vendors who trusted who was out there. So he did good to us, we needed to do good with him. And so for about a year, we did it that way. And then he ended up losing the second one. And it made it very, very difficult to get to where we were. So finally he was able to get all disability and retire. But I think 1987. Doug decided he wanted to try street vending in Washington, D.C. So we took it apart. I got it permitted in Washington. We hired a guy, trained him down here. I took him with me to Washington. I was going to drop the fucking trailer and drop him off in the corner. He would work at the time at the end of the day and pick him up. But in Washington, you had to go to a class every day for a week and then pass a test by the Board of Health to be certified. So I also took the course so that I could tutor my vendor. Well, the first day out, it's in the summer, it's 100 degrees. He always passes out. He tells me he can't take it. That afternoon, I had to put him on a plane and fly back. I'm the only one now certified. So I am the vendor. I fly Doug's son Mark up, and he drops me off and picks me up. Every corner, we put this car in about 7 different corners. Every corner I put this car in, I was threatened by vendors. I pull up in one corner outside of the FBI building. You couldn't be within 10 feet of one vendor. I had a tape measure. I measured from the fruit vendor to where I was, one of the park, to where there was a giant planter, knowing that no other vendor could encroach on us. So I started setting up, and the fruit vendor, a young Italian kid, New York, looks at me. He says, you know, if you're a girl, they would probably rough you up, but you're a guy, they're probably going to beat you up, maybe kill you and haul you off. I said, who? He said, Philip. I said, who's Philip? He said, he's the vendor that only works this for. I said, but by law, you can't establish a permanent form. First come, first serve. He said, that's not what Philip means. Philip pulls up. He's got a little yellow Volkswagen. He's a pretty good size Philippines. And he's got towing the car behind him. He says, what are you doing? I said, well, he said, this is my corner. I said, well, look, Philip, just for today, I'm only doing a test. I'm only here one day. I said, I've got 3 cars in town. I'm here for one day on this corner. It's yours tomorrow. I will not bother you. He said, I'm going to work it today. I said, Philip, if you do that, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. 2 cars. I'm going to put all 3 of them, and I'll sell them off half price. What you do? I'll put you on. Leave me alone, and I'm gone. He said, man, today's my birthday. I said, well, happy birthday. And he leaves. About 45 minutes later, the biggest person from the Philippines I've ever seen pulls up on a Harley. Where's Philip? Who's asking? I'm his brother. I said, I bet you forgot the day was Philip's birthday. He's going to the beach. And he took off. I go work another corner the next day. I didn't put the cart on the corner. I put it in the middle of the block. I did not want to take money necessarily from the other two. I just wanted to see how it would work out. I'm doing okay. It's lunchtime. This gentleman comes up, looks at me, and he says, I like steak on my table. I said, I enjoy steak also. He said, no, you don't understand. I said, obviously I don't. He said, that's my cart on the table. And you're taking money out of my pocket, so now I can't buy steak. He said, some friends of mine and I are going to come back here, and we're going to throw this cart in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue. And when we get through with you, you'd never come back. I said, let me ask you, do I look like the northern man? I was pretty good. He said, no. Does this cart, brand new Lucky Dog cart, look like a regular vending cart? He said, no. I said, between you and I want you to understand something. This cart is owned by the Dixie Mafia. I said, I owe them a lot of money for gambling. And I'm having to work this cart to pay off my bill. I said, matter of fact, they're watching me right now. I said, between you and I, they're not just going to sell hot dogs for this cart. You understand what I'm saying? These guys are really into this stuff. Now he's getting nervous. And he's in Washington, and the summer people are sitting out on the trees. They're reading newspapers. They're reading books. And he starts looking at all people. And he doesn't know which ones are the mine. I said, listen, what I want you to do, I want you to smile like we're having a good conversation. And then I think you need to buy a jumbo and a drink. I sold him a jumbo and a drink. And then he went over and he told his girl to push in. And didn't bother me for the rest of the time. The Vietnamese would take kids and put them on cars, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, by teenagers, and just save a woman. You know, let me flip. We decided not to go onto Russia, mainly because they had passed an ordinance where no one could own more than 1 permit, so there was no way for a company. You can only get individual. Probably most of y'all heard on the evening news about Lucky Dogs and the vending in the quarter and the monopoly and all of that. Let me tell you the true story, which they didn't tell you. You're assuming that we had a monopoly in the quarter, right? Wrong. We had 22 vending points. The ice cream vending has 22 vending points. The one they never mentioned, it was a minority, East Indian, like the farm. But it didn't fit their narrative to say Lucky Dog had 22 permits and a minority vendor had 22 permits. So they eliminated mentioning the minority vendor. The Supreme Court case we showed the City of New Orleans versus Nancy Dukes and Louisiana Concessions. Back in the 70s, Lucky Dog was never part of that news. Nancy Dukes was selling sandwiches out of a homemade cart. Some people say it was wheelbarrow. In Jackson Square. She had no permit. The city said, you can't operate. She said, I want a permit. They said, we're not going to give you one. And she said, on what basis? Well, the city council, in their infinite wisdom, created something called a grandfather, where if you hadn't operated for 8 years or more, you could not operate. That left us operating and Uncle Robert's ice cream. Anyone else couldn't. And they did that as a stopgap to save time. And in that time, they were going to create and write a new one. They never wrote a new one. She appealed, she took it to court, the city won. She appealed it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. She won in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The city then appealed it to the U.S. Supreme Court, of which no one believed the U.S. Supreme Court in this case, dealing with hot dogs in the French court. Lo and behold, because of the grandfather clause and its ramifications with the real estate, that the Supreme Court heard this case. And what they ended up ruling was that in order to preserve the historic character and charm of a given area, a city may legally discriminate, even though you are both equal under the eyes of the law. For whatever reason, the city may say you may operate and you may not. In the 70s, when this was going on, the reason the city created the grandfather clause laws, some of you may remember, when you walk down Bourbon Street, there were people selling parcels of land in California, funeral flowers, jewelry, cameras, you name it, on every corner, tourists were being relaxed. And that's why the city council was trying to eliminate all of the excess vendors. Now, at any moment from 1976, when that case was solved or decided, until the present day, the city council had the right to go ahead and allow anyone to operate. We, Lucky Dogs, had no control and no dogs and nothing at all. Most of the councils, or all of the councils in the past, had not done it because they were scared when you open Pandora's box, what is going to happen. Now, I always kept parking corners that we had operated since 1947. If someone bought a building or put a new business in a certain building, we were there before they ever moved. So we always told them we're just maintaining our corner. We could have been on any corner in the court, but we chose not to. We chose to just maintain the one we were. What's going to happen now, and it's going to be interesting. After COVID, really even in spring, but mostly in COVID, we would put out 22 permits. Other than Mardi Gras, we would never put out more than 10 to 12 permits. The corner just can't hold that many vendors. There's not enough money for the vendor working on the street to survive. What will happen now is we've given up 7 permits for the city. We didn't need them anyway. And then they took 7 permits from the iceberg. That's 14. And the city had 5 other permits that people were working throughout the rest of the city. So that's 19. And they're going to allow these 19 vendors to come into the court. There will never be enough to make it financially viable. They're never going to go from a brick and mortar. I mean, that's fantastic. I know what certain corners can do. I mean, I've been looking at these figures for 46 years. I can tell you, it's not going to happen. But for political reasons, it will happen. It may the best man or woman win. I mean, they did this before when Councilwoman Taylor was in. They put vendors on Canal Street and then the CBD, and they lasted about 8 months. To build a Lucky Dog park is a little over $30,000. Because when you build something like that, you're building 1 or 2 at a time, and you're going to a fabricator. The price comes tremendously down if you can do 50, and you set up the production to do 50. But if you're doing 1 or 2, your shop takes just as much time to set the machine up to do 1 as it does to run 50. And then in a paint booth, you're taking the paint booth with 4 to 5 different colors. You're tying the paint booth for longer time. So it will probably cost them, though, using rectangular parts, maybe $12,000 to $15,000 a part. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You can't go sell gumbo on the street. You're not going to sell fried chicken on the street. There's certain things that you allow to sell. Most of them are prepackaged products. And probably not going to something. Other than that, you might could sell hot tamales. And our license allows us to sell hot tamales, but no one walking down Bourbon Street wants to have a bowl of hot tamales and then try to eat it while they walk. It just, it's not, it is. So we pulled out of Washington. Next line. In the 1950s, the Loyal County Brothers sold some cars to a gentleman in Caracas, Venezuela. But the government would not allow the carts to go on the street because they were scared of more than 2 or 3 people getting together at any one point. I thought the cart might place the seeds of a revolution. You people would be around the corner. So they were contacted literally by 20, 25, 30 different countries, people in 30 different countries rolling cars. They never expanded beyond Peru because they sold those cars, they never sold any more cars at the time. Back. This is on the island of Martinique. The gentleman, Elaine, contacted us from Martinique and wanted to put hot dog carts on the island. And Doug said, well, you know, we should try it. And I said, my bags are packed. I'm heading to Martinique. So I went down and trained him. There was a gentleman on the right with the coat, with the red white stripe. He was actually trained by the French as a fighter pilot, but he was our vendor. We tried it down there. We took it to the stadium where the island of Martinique was playing Cuba for the soccer championship of the Caribbean. This was their Super Bowl. We were able to get the card inside, 37,000 people. Our cards parked in a prominent location right by the fence. Everyone in the stadium can see it. I started taking pictures of the car. The crowd behind me starts screaming. And it just starts going around the stadium. And I asked Elaine, who spoke, kind of amazing, he spoke English, he spoke French, he spoke Spanish, and he could go from one to the other all of the time. And I said, Elaine, what is the problem? He said, you. I said, me? Why am I a problem? He said, they realize you're American. And he said, you're taking pictures. And I know you're taking pictures, but they think you're taking pictures of the Cuban general on the field. And this is their Super Bowl. You have no right to interfere with the Super Bowl. I said, look, he said, put the camera in the car and I will explain. So he did, and the crowd kind of bowed down. Well, the next day, sales was pretty good. But the next day, Elaine and I go to lunch. And this gentleman, three-piece suit, very debonair, looks like a Wall Street banker, walks up, sits down with us. And we're talking. We're talking about the soccer game. And then at the end, he gets up and he leans over and he says, don't believe everything you hear about the PLA. I said, excuse me? I said, and he walks away. I said, Elaine, what does he mean? He said, Jerry, he's the head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization of the Caribbean. He meant what he said. I said, great, I just lunch for the terrorists. So the next one. Now, we ended up not staying in Martinique because the French passed an ordinance where we could not fly product. It couldn't be flown in. The meat could only be shipped in via container. We would have had to ship so many hundreds of thousands of pounds in. It just made it impossible to sell. So we didn't follow that. Beijing Lucky Bags. Right after 2000, we became a legalized business in China. A young gentleman from New Orleans who lived in China, spoke fluent Chinese, Mandarin, incredibly young man. And he wanted to bring a Lucky Dog cart to China because in order to stay in China, you have to have employment. So he wanted to own the cart. So I said, let's ship one over. So we shipped the cart via air because it was going to take too long by boat. We shipped it via air, but the plane went to Frankfurt, Germany. So the Frankfurt started. Our freight got unloaded, and they kept not putting it on the next plane to China because it was too long. But we finally got it to China. I flew over, and we opened the business. In order to open a business in China, you have to be permitted by 22 different departments. And every department has a stamp, kind of like ours, and they stamp your permit. Any one of those 22 decide they don't want you there, you're not there. And they never tell you that the reason that they're not permitting you, your permit just gets lost in the application process. And then you have to start all over. Now, McDonald's was there for a long time. You have to have a minority partner. It's not a minority partner, it's a majority partner in China. They own 51% of whatever company, U.S. company comes over. That allows them to see all the technology and everything else that you're doing. And if you have to sue them, you're never going to win. You're in China, and it's a Chinese judge. So, but we got permitted. We went over and we tried. Now, we were trying to sell fast food items to Chinese who are not impulsive people. That didn't work. Plus, most people didn't know if it was a missile or not. And then if we made a profit, we started that. There was an 8-to-1 ratio. $1 equals 8 renminbis. But when you reverse it, try to bring money out of China back, you're losing money. So the only way to really make a profit was to open an import-export, buy goods in China, ship them over here, sell them over here, and then reap the profits here. It was too cumbersome. A couple of guys doing street vending business. So we tried it. It was interesting. It was fun. I went to one place to look at meat, and they waited till lunch. They cleaned up the whole factory, and then they invited us to have lunch. And there was a huge about the size, giant table in the middle, with huge lazy Susan about every product they had. And you would sit there and try each piece of the product. And they also would say, gun may, which is bottoms up. They would serve, and I don't really drink, but they would serve beer, and they would serve Beijing. It's a Chinese alcohol that people say could be used to send someone to the moon. Glass, etched glass, or maybe used as a degreaser. I mean, it was, you drink it quick and you don't go beyond that. Yeah, look, I'm looking, I'm going to speed up, but we pulled out of China after 3 months. It's too corrupt. And that's just part of China. The next one. This shows you that not everything translates. Long life and long happy counting spirits of old living. Just I put that picture because it just doesn't make sense. The next one. Yeah, a lucky dog. It's on Christmas cards. The next one. A lady sent me this. She made a little lucky dog card for her son, who I guess is going to be Ignatius from Mardi Gras. This is a lady sent me this at Halloween. She turned her horse into a lucky dog. The next one. Gambit, the best in New Orleans. The next one. Again, the best in New Orleans for the lucky dog card. The next one. We were in Time magazine. They had the Great American Sandwiches back, I think, in '86. And the Rolling Stones. We didn't make it on the covers, but we did make it inside. And then the next one. What's the president to do? They asked Chet Anderson. Time magazine wanted to know. The next one. That's Lucky Dog on Gravier Street. The next one. And that's the sequel to the book that you have. That's a sequel to it. It takes it from '98 to '99. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I noticed the board, and I guess that's what we're referring to, bringing in the carts, bringing in the money. But on Gravier, it still has Mr. Towers' name. Did he pass?
But his name is not on the
Nobody on the deed.
Oh yeah, no. Doug passed. His two sons, who Mark was in diapers. He's now 57. When I started working for Doug, and Kirk is 54, 55, and he wasn't born yet. He's now a state senator. But yeah, they now run Lucky Dogs. What I did after COVID, I knew they couldn't afford my salaries anymore. So I went from 7 days to 3 days. So I started backing down to maybe 4 days, and then I backed myself down to 3 days, and then to 2 days. And to cut the salary, to cut my time, so that when I finally walk out the door, they would say, God, we don't need him anyway. But they still call me. We talk all that. I talked yesterday, but we talk all the time. Yes.
And we went places, we sent other pizzas, hot dogs, and there was a place, I think it's somewhere around there. And at the time, we invented the hot dog. And I said,
I thought we've been in Frankfurt, Germany.
I know, I said, there's no place like ours.
Yeah, everybody has their local favorite. Yeah.
Who's your most famous celebrity up there?
We were on Good Morning America. We've been on. We've done hot dog parks for Reagan's. One of his was at Lavender Park. Oh, I'll tell you. Football player. I don't think his name right now. Pittsburgh Steelers. Franco Harris.
Oh yeah.
Franco. When they opened Riverwalk, Franco Harris was there, and he walked up with his entourage. And they were having a good time. So, and I was very hot. I put about 6 parts there. And he walked up to the car. One of the guys said, "Hey, do you know who this is? Do you know who this is?" He's talking to me. And you could not mistake Franco Harris. A Grecian look. I mean, he was absolutely unmistakable. And I looked at him and I said, Reggie Jackson. And he was all onto it. Started walking away. Oh yeah, Mr. Everybody knows me. I never told him. Thank you.